All right, everybody, welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I am your host, AJ Armstrong, and today we had a really incredible guest. His name is Ryan Coon. Now, Ryan is a Chicago-based startup entrepreneur, and we can't always find these tech startup entrepreneurs sometimes, but Ryan is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Avail. And Avail is a one-stop shop solution designed for landlords that can bridge the gap between landlord and tenant. So this platform's got over 600,000 users and tenants across the United States between landlords and tenants that use this platform. And he's built his team to over 30 plus people. This is a really awesome opportunity that we kind of went through to see some of his pain struggles, but also how he carved out a little bit of a market niche in a space that was generally kind of consumed at the time, but it was consumed by different startups, and we explain that in detail. But Ryan is a ton of energy, a ton of fun, and a fantastic guest to have on the show to share with you guys some of the hiccups and struggles of going from the very beginning, but to a operating, and how it doesn't really get a lot easier, but the challenges just change a little bit. So this is a fantastic interview. I really enjoyed it, and I encourage you guys to check this one out because this will give you some awesome inspiration and tips for startups and aspiring startups out in the world of entrepreneurship. So without further ado, folks, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you
how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
Take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of, and what is the plan to overcome that fear, and what is the plan to enact that passion.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I'm your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me on Instagram at AaronArmstrong33, or you can go to AaronJArmstrong.com/podcast. You can listen to this podcast and others. We have the podcast Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. Winners, talking about people crushing it in life and their different avenues or spheres. We talk about wallets, personal finance, money, entrepreneurship, real estate. And finally, we're going to talk about worldviews. We bring on guests to talk about different positions or insights they have from their life philosophy. You know, I talk about my faith quite openly, but we like to have those friendly debates as well on this podcast. But we're going to talk a little bit about all of it today here. We got on the other line, we got Ryan Coon, who is going to tell us all about his experience as an entrepreneur, but really some impressive platforms that he's built up for himself as well. So Ryan, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, AJ. Really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, this is a real treat for me because, you know, we very rarely have people, well, I shouldn't say rarely, but it's always refreshing to see people that are like doing things. I made a post about this the other day about how, you know, there's a lot of advisory, you know, entrepreneurs out there. They give a lot of advice. They got a lot of tips. I think that's good, but there's a huge need for people that actually do things for other people. You know, like what's the product you're creating? What is the thing we're making? And it's cool to see that you've kind of built a lot of those over the course of your career. So without giving too many spoiler alerts, tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of like what was your childhood like and kind of bringing you into the entrepreneur life?
Yeah, for sure. So very high level today, run a company called Avail, helps landlords easily manage rental properties. Kind of my background, way I got into this was originally grew up in northwest suburbs of Chicago, went to school here in the Midwest, ILL, moved up to Chicago in 2007 after finishing undergrad, took a job for a large global investment bank. So I was working for this large bank. I was advising big public companies on mergers and acquisitions. I was working the like crazy 100 hours a week in banking. Really had, was earning some money, but had virtually no personal life, no social life. So through that period of time, 08, 09, saw the real estate market had reset. Prices had come down a little bit. So I decided, you know, rather than throw my money into the stock market, I'm going to invest in some real estate. So did that, bought a few single family homes up near the Wisconsin border, and then was managing
my territory.
Yeah. All the way up there. So, and it worked well. It was a good business, but I was doing that in addition to a full-time job. And I was managing my rental properties with spreadsheets, pen and paper checks, smoke signals, like you name it. I was trying to duct tape a bunch of this stuff together. And what I eventually learned is that as an owner, as the landlord property owner, I was wasting a bunch of time because it was this duct tape homegrown solution. And then unfortunately, a lot of things kind of fell through the cracks. So I would miss a text message from a renter, for example. Like I know sitting here today in August, like if the air conditioner goes out, that's a big problem.
Mhm.
And eventually, unfortunately, some of those things would happen. I would miss a message and stuff. And so my renters started asking, hey, is there a way you can manage this property better? And so through that, I really uncovered a need, uncovered, about half of all the rentals in the US are owned and managed by guys and gals like us who are busy professionals, part-time landlord. Eventually saw a need, spent a couple of years actually learning to write code. So
Really?
a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that process. But that was like 2012 to 2015.
How long did that take you to kind of get like fluent in writing code? And what kind of code was it?
Yeah, so learned Ruby on Rails.
Okay.
So, Ruby on Rails primarily, but through that you learn some HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and stuff.
Sure.
The process I started in 2012, and then I would say it probably took 18-ish months to get like pretty comfortable. And then another like year and a half after that, my co-founder and I had eventually cobbled together what is now known as Avail. So that entire journey, and I say learning to code, it's just like any other foreign language where if you don't use it day in and day out, you lose it. For us, it was just a lot of like staying focused, trying to just grind, and eventually trusting that we'll get that skill, we'll be able to launch a product that has blossomed into this really successful business with 30-ish employees here in Chicago, fast growing tech startup. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded my background.
Well, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about like the process of how you came up with Avail. So you were a landlord, you're kind of experiencing some of these pain points, but my geekiness as the systems engineer is like, okay, so like, did you gather requirements ahead of time? Like, these are all the things that I thought we needed to automate or figure out, and kind of go into, I guess, how you laid that out, how you decided to do it.
Yeah, so that whole like research customer discovery phase for us really started with how I was as a landlord managing my properties. My co-founder Lawrence, he had bought a 3-unit building here in Chicago up on Damon Avenue. So he had some familiarity, and so we eventually sat down here at a Starbucks near our office, where our office is today, and he and I just listed out everything that we did for our properties, and starting with like every small detail. And then we went out and we started talking with friends and family who also owned rental properties and said, how are you doing these things? And what we eventually came to realize was that whether it's a single family home or whether it's an apartment unit or it's a unit in like a big high-rise building, that one unit, those 4 walls that a person calls home, really you've got to do 5 main things. So you've got to find tenants, screen them, sign a lease, collect rent, and manage maintenance. And it doesn't matter what the 4 walls are or where in the country it is. All units need those 5 things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Tell me a little bit about like, so there's a lot of softwares on the market, right? So like one of the ones that my property manager uses, I think they're using Buildium now, and there was another competitive one. I forget the name of it. You could probably help me out. You probably know it better than I do.
Appfolio, maybe.
Appfolio, that's what it was. Yeah, so we switched over. And then there's people that kind of do these like boutique self-management ones like Cozy or something like that doesn't have quite as many features. But tell me a little bit about number one, like the barriers to entry. So knowing that there's like kind of these giants out there, and then number 2, how you were able to kind of carve out a little bit of a market despite having some of these big boys out there.
Yeah, great question. So before we even launched the company, we were really focused on what can we do that'll actually change and improve lives. And we want to impact a lot of people. And so part of that whole business case, convincing ourselves that this was worth pursuing, was really trying to understand what's the rental landscape look like. And in the United States, there's about 48 million residential rental housing units, depending on kind of what you include and stuff. About half of those are institutionally owned or professionally managed. And so those are the big like Blackstone, the Avalons, whoever. They own and manage properties. They've got like real clunky enterprise software that they've been using for a long time. The other half of the properties in the country are actually owned and managed by men and women like us, who have full-time jobs. Most individuals who own real estate choose to manage it themselves. So I know in certain markets, property management is a big industry, but by and large, a lot of people who are like us just decide, hey, I'm going to manage it myself. I'll post it on Craigslist. I'll, collect a check each month. Maybe I'll run an ad in the newspaper, maybe 20 years ago. And so we really looked at this half of the market and said, no one's really building good software. This was 2012, 2013. So I think Gino was just starting out with Cozy, which was like a renter first platform that would tie into social media and stuff. Eventually built it into a successful business, sold it to apartments.com. But for us, we really looked at this and said, for men and women like us who own and manage rentals, we want to provide the most complete set of tools, and we want to be laser focused, and we want to do it better than anyone else. So that's really kind of how we decided to kind of cut up the market and say, we don't care about the bigger owners. Even someone who uses Buildium or Appfolio, they're bigger than our target. We're really targeting individuals who own and self-manage less than 10 units.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's something interesting because like I think you hit on a key point that a lot of people forgot, like with COVID. So like when the whole COVID thing started and you looked at how rental properties and the landlords weren't getting paid from tenants, and everyone assumed that it was like these big industries that own a lot of the properties. And you're like, no, 50% of these were owned by people that have like part-time jobs, people that we talk about, like, building passive income, having a cash cow that can sit there and generate cash flow for you. It's very much like sometimes people's only entrepreneurial venture they'll ever touch. So like, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that got lost in a lot of the media, and the coverage is like, oh, it's just these rich people that are there. No, it's like middle-class dudes that are just sitting there trying to make a penny on rental properties. And then, I looked in when we looked into like, Buildium, and I've tossed around the idea, like I outsource my management, right? Because I don't want to deal with that. But every once in a while you look at the margins, you're like, hey, we can tighten up 7 to 10% if we bring that in house, but I don't want to do it. I don't really have enough units to pay for somebody yet. So it's kind of like this odd space, right? And with softwares like Buildium, they get really expensive because you need a minimum amount of units before you see that ROI. So we've looked at Cozy, right? And then Cozy sounds like it's a little bit one of your competitors, but you mentioned you do it better. And I want to know, like, what is it that you decided was just not quite there for something like Cozy that is there with Avail?
Yeah, well, I think number one, and I kind of hinted at it earlier. So when Cozy got started, it was this like group of Silicon Valley software engineers and designers that none of them actually owned rental units, number one. So their initial product.
Classic startup boys, right? Let's just come up with an app that looks like it's a problem we can sell, but don't actually get in there, right?
I mean, you read some of the early stories. It's like they were trying to find an apartment in San Francisco, and things are way overpriced, and there's no inventory because the building codes don't allow you to build more than 3 stories high and all that stuff. And so what they eventually did is the problem they initially started trying to solve was that as renters, you go around and you pay an application fee at all these different apartments, and you don't get any of them because you don't have a certain level of income or whatever, and you don't qualify. So Cozy's initial product was actually, forget all the like credit and background check process that like we probably both rely on today. They said, why don't you just hook into your LinkedIn and your social media, and essentially we'll run an algorithm and tell you that this will be a good renter. So that was like the very initial Cozy product was that, and then they eventually morphed and pivoted a little bit into more landlord focused tools.
Sure.
That's where we started. Lawrence and I, we built this product for independent landlords like us who were looking for a better way to manage properties. So early on, it wasn't like an us versus Cozy. It was just, hey, we're
Just
the
isn't
we're,
there.
we're the ones building for landlords. Now we probably compete a little bit more directly today, but still love and respect everything they're doing there.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely interesting to kind of see that, because one of the, I think people that haven't experienced entrepreneurship at any level, one of the common themes that they hear is like, well, somebody else has done that. And it's like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do it better, cheaper, faster, these types of things that we forget. And that's, I think, the idea of when you talk about the classic business principles of barriers to entry. It's like, oh, okay, there's some big boys out there. We got Buildium, we got Appfolio, we got Cozy, or Cozy might not have been as big at the time when you started, but it's the idea of like, how can we differentiate ourselves? And you went from like a ground up approach, it looks like. I'm just kind of laying this like case study out there because it's cool to listen to your story, right? And it's like, you went this ground up approach. You said, look, I'm looking at solving the problem here. We're not looking at just immediately putting together some kind of app that we can just sell off and get an exit strategy or whatever. It's like, no, we're landlords, and we want to figure out how we can ease the friction here between the landlords and the tenants. What I guess is a feature or something of the app that you kind of developed and the software that you think is kind of unique to you guys?
Yeah, one of the features that I love, that I think is really special and really unique, and as much as I was just talking about our product being landlord first, the feature that I'm probably most passionate about right now is one that we actually developed about a year ago for renters, and that is a feature that we call Credit Boost. And so what that does is it takes all of the online payments. So each month we're processing tens of thousands of rent payments between renter and landlord, and tens of millions of dollars in rent. And all of those on-time rent payments are being reported back to the credit bureaus. So we're actually helping individuals improve their credit score by paying rent on time. And
That's crazy. Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's like crazy powerful. A lot of renters historically haven't had that benefit. And you look at, what's one of the biggest barriers to eventually owning a home or eventually buying an investment property and becoming a landlord yourself? Well, it's building credit. And so we're selling that. One case study on that, we had a woman on our team just convinced her landlord to start using Credit Boost earlier this year, accepting payments through Avail. Within 3 months, she saw her personal credit score increase by 40 points. It's just crazy powerful, the things that we're able to unlock through that feature.
Yeah, just to break that down for people that aren't familiar with the back end of how your credit is kind of built. So I think when I was younger in my early 20s, I just thought that like every payment I ever made was tracked, and it was just like part of some kind of all-knowing system. And most of your payments that you make towards things are not tracked. So what happens is you make an agreement to pay a debt or a credit of some kind to somebody, and then you end up paying that. Well, the person that's receiving that payment has the option to report that to the credit bureau. So these are like your Experian or some other big guys or whatever that kind of track those, and then those are the people like Equifax or whatever. They take that information, they generate your credit report, and they kind of average them out, and they'll send that to a bank or whoever requests your credit report. What we found out is like most of it is like your credit cards and major financial institutions are the people that are sending that information back to these credit bureaus, but like landlords or your local, you finance a jet ski or something like that, most of those guys aren't reporting that necessarily back to the credit. So if you are making your payments on time, like your rent every month, or you're making your payments on your jet ski every month, you're not getting credit for making those payments. So what you've done is you've created this system, it sounds like, that you can actually track for landlords. Like you just pay, if you just know your landlord, because some guy down the street or girl down the street or whatever, they're not going to sit there and report that back to the credit bureau, but you're tracking that data and reporting it. So that actually helps the tenants increase their credit.
Yeah, that's 100% right, AJ. And I think, there's also this like other dynamic in there where an individual landlord, like I own 3 single family homes. Like I can't go knocking on Experian's door and saying, hey, I've got 3 renters. They were paying their rent on time. Can I please report this to you? Experian is going to say, Ryan, sorry, unfortunately, like we only work with bigger companies. But now here with Avail, because we're doing this for tens of thousands, almost 100,000 people each month, Experian will pick up our phone call. They'll talk to us because we're able to just bring the volume that they need in a standardized way that helps these renters eventually improve their scores.
Yeah, a little tip too. We've worked with clients before that have had issues getting loans and stuff and improving their credit because of that exact reason. There's a lot of things you're making payment, like your water bill or your electrical bill, that aren't being reported to these credit unions or to these credit bureaus. And one of the things that if you set up like a profile online or something with one of these credit bureaus, you can actually like send scanned copies of your history of payments to them, and you can improve your credit score that way as well. So you can get some really quick hitters, 25, 30 points, and that can be, several interest points, when you come down to getting your loans and stuff. So just a little tiny pro tip I didn't know we were going to talk about that, but a little tiny pro tip you guys can use if you're looking like, hey, I'm thinking of buying a house, or I'm thinking of buying a property and my credit's like good, or it's not quite there. I want to get to that next level. It's like, look at all those things because you'll be shocked at how little is actually being reported. It could just be a couple things like your student loan, your house or something or whatever. It's just there's a lot of things you've probably made payments on that could show you're reliable to make your payments back. Well, cool, man. That's an interesting feature though. That's really a good idea for people that are especially trying to build, they're trying to, maybe they want to be a landlord or they want to buy property someday and they're just renting. They'll have that opportunity to do that. So that's interesting. Well, share with me a little bit about like what was kind of like your biggest struggle, I guess, when you were going through this, or are you in a struggle right now? I guess what's like something that was really put you down and you had to kind of overcome it.
Yeah, my co-founder and I, we've both been entrepreneurs on a small scale before. We've both started different side hustles during high school and college and stuff. But this business here with Avail is our first real business that we started with the goal of making it big. And one of the things that we screwed up royally, and it was really painful for us, early on, we made a mistake of saying, we're landlords, we have this problem, we would use a product like Avail. And we went down that path of investing a lot of time, money, effort, energy into building the product that we wanted. And like the classic, like, don't do this entrepreneur 101 story, we just assumed that every other landlord like us would want to use it. Mm-hmm. So we completely disregarded how hard it would be to get landlords and to get tenants to use our product. So we went to sum it up, we built it and they didn't come. And that was like biggest mistake that we've ever made. I would advise anyone who's thinking about starting a business, focus way more attention on the marketing and audience building than on the product.
That's an interesting dichotomy you brought up. And I tried to bring that up a little bit with my podcast with John Lee Dumas, it was talking about podcasting. Like it was basically, do I want to be a really authentic host and just ask questions that I think are interesting, or do I want to listen to my audience and ask questions that they think are interesting? It's like, I don't know which one's right. And, we kind of danced around that issue a little bit, but that's kind of the same with when you're kind of designing your product too, right? It's like, well, is there a market for this? But also, well, I had the pain and the experience with it. So therefore what is the weight? What is, you say, more on the side of what the market's saying than what you're saying, or is it, what's the balance in there? 80-20?
Well, yeah, I think there's, a bunch of things buried in there. So in terms of like product that you build and features that you build, I think it's imperative to listen to customers. Like they're your biggest fan, biggest critic. So you've got to listen.
And how do you solicit that feedback too? Do you do like focus groups, or just like, what do you do? What's your system?
Yeah, so today our system, we've got an in-house customer support team. We've got designers that are listening to customers every day. They're engaging with customers, they're taking notes, they're ranking things in our internal tracking system. But I think early on, more what I should have done, and Lawrence would agree with me, we should have spent a lot more time, even before writing that first line of code. What we should have done is spun up a blog or like some sort of content and just started building an audience and building a following of people interested in real estate, interested in how do you manage properties. So what we should have done, much more important than building a product, is actually building that audience.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting. That's the first time I've heard an idea like that, like kind of, because it gives you an opportunity to pivot. So like when I first started doing like this podcast and stuff, I had owned some rental properties, and my wife had started her fitness business, but I didn't know what I wanted to do really when I grew up either, but I thought that if I could build the personal brand, it kind of gave you that launch pad to where you could kind of feel out your position in the marketplace, and then you could attack, and that's kind of what my strategy still is. I still just kind of do a little bit of real estate here and there. I do some consulting work, but for the most part, it's like still kind of like, what is the pain point, so I can make sure when I see that like golden opportunity, you really have the audience, the position, the framework, the people that have been following you. You want to write a book, you want to have an idea, you'll at least maybe be able to carve out a little piece of that audience to be able to market something to. And I think that's like the power of the personal brand,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like that's kind of what you're recommending in a way, like find like a little niche on a personal brand side and say like something in real estate. And then you can kind of really capture people like, oh, wow, this is a serious problem, but you've got an audience that you can now get a little traction with early on.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, at least in the startup world, subscribe to the whole lean startup methodology, which really promotes build your MVP, your minimum viable product,
Yep.
and get it out there, get it in the customer's hands. And I think what I'm advocating for is just build your minimum viable audience, build that MVA, focus on getting that audience in place. And then you're right, AJ, like to your point, you can then look for different opportunities. Once you've got that engaged audience, once you've got those authentic relationships, that when you eventually do go down the path of building a product, you've got people to which you can partner with and sell it to and work on it with.
Yeah, that's if you ever look at when I'm just Googling or researching stuff and you come across a blog post and you're like, wow, this has really got some cool tips. That blog post usually belongs to some software, right? And it's like, because that's a great way of marketing softwares is they put out so much great content, education, and it's like, and then the call to action is kind of like, hey, you should check out this software that we have that solves the problem we just described. And I think that's kind of if you're looking to go down that route of starting a business or starting something, but you have a blog where you kind of are philosophizing, I guess, if you will, around the industry. And then you can start to research, just like a research professor or a PhD or someone, they're going to research, and then you're going to find a market need in there somewhere. Unless you have that kind of like experience, that raw experience that's just like, this is something I need to just chase or go. I think everybody's situation is different, but I think that's great advice, especially for people that are still floating around in their 20s, don't know what the heck they want to do. It's like, how about you start, like, just keep learning things and studying, but take people along for that learning journey. Kind of like what I'm doing, right? Like, I don't know anything about a tech startup or, whatever, but it's like you provide so much interesting context to a tech startup that you can just take so many golden nuggets and beauty around, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fun that goes into it too. And I can get the sense that we both really enjoy that learning journey. And that's really what it's all about is taking people along for that ride.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, I guess, like, what's been kind of that claim to fame that you can stand on and say like, wow, you're always on this endless journey of life, but what's something you feel like you really arrived when you hit this mark,
Yeah, no, I hate thinking about like have arrived, because
right.
For us, it's still like every day is day one.
It's endless, right?
We're still, we're very happy with where we are, but certainly not satisfied. Certainly, I think complacency kills a lot of businesses. But the thing that I'm probably the most proud of today is actually the team that we've built here with the company. I look around, I'm in our office today. just happen to stop by, pick up mail, have this conversation. Our office, because of COVID's empty, but I look around here when we do our weekly calls with everyone on our team, with all 30 people, and I look at just the quality, the diversity, the experience, the knowledge, the teamwork, the culture, everything that goes into building a good team. And that's by far the thing that I'm the most proud of. One story, we just a couple of weeks ago celebrated one of our employees just celebrated their 5-year anniversary with us.
Wow.
She was our first hire 5 years ago and is still with us. We've been able to, expand her role, expand her responsibilities, increase her compensation. So there's just so much there that I'm like passionate about, excited about.
Well, that brings up a really cool, point as well that I think would be interesting to dig into. When I was at West Point, it was like you're being groomed to be a general. You're just going to have this massive team of people, and you're just going to be this freaking orchestrator, pointing your fingers, that kind of thing. And that's like the vision of leadership. And when you're in this like startup environment, gosh, it's way different, right? It's like you're not part of an institution. You don't have shared values per se. And then you also have a lot to do, like a lot of selling of the vision. I mean, you mentioned somebody of 5 years has been with you. Like early on, you probably, were just all over the place. Like, how do you lead at that like micro level? How do you lead with such small people that are just like that? You can't pay them sometimes, maybe because like, we're starting and we got to figure some stuff out. And I'm sorry, like people go through that as entrepreneurs. And what would your advice be to like get through that with people around you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a couple of things. So number one, I think authentic conversations, transparency, all build trust. So in order to really lead an organization or lead a team, you've got to build that level of trust on a personal one-to-one relationship with people, where they trust you, you trust them. Beyond that, I think the idea of leadership for me that I've really grasped onto is around really servant leadership. And the way that I think about things a lot here at the company is almost as the leader, it's almost my job here is really just to amplify and remove barriers for everyone on my team. And I want to hire people who are better, smarter than I am, and really think about like, are there ways that I can help each individual on our team learn and grow and develop into whatever they want to do? Whether that's a part of Avail or not, how do I just help them? And that's really the mindset that I've taken with building our team is, and now in coaching some of our managers to really think about, for this individual on our team who's maybe creating blog content, like she's a year out of school. What does she want to do? And where does she want to be in 3 years? Maybe that's part of Avail, maybe it's not. But my role as CEO of the company, the manager who oversees her, it's our responsibility. Help her in whatever it is she wants to do. However she defines success, let's help her do that. Hopefully that's as part of Avail, hopefully that there's a match between kind of the needs of the company and her interests. But as long as we do that, and as long as we help her become the best professional that she can and that she wants to be, that's going to pay off. And that's really the mindset that I've taken over the last 5 years. And I think is what leads us to still having, I can't think of the last person that actually like voluntarily quit and left our organization. It hasn't happened in 2+ years. Like it's extremely rare. People love what we're doing and people continue growing. People are passionate. I mean, they're working harder here than they've ever worked, but they're loving it and enjoying it.
Yeah, I think that what you brought up earlier is kind of your foundation principles of like that, just that trust, the transparency. It allows, this servant leadership to transcend the walls of the company. And it's just like, I'm looking at you as not an employee, but I'm looking at you as a person that's going to grow and develop into whatever you need to be to kind of serve that God-given purpose that you kind of have within you. And I think that just the mere fact of being that servant like is enough to build people's loyalty to your cause too, in a way, right? So it's like, it might be their mission or not, but I think that they'll be more excited to work with a person that's willing to do what's in their best interest first and what's in the company's best interest second. And then it kind of defaults into, well, this is now you're working for the company's interest because I'm working for your interest. And it's kind of a beautiful circle, right? that it kind of works like that, if that made sense at all.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I mean, I think about, and I say this to every person that we interview, every person that we hire, where in a really somewhat abstract way, the company itself is more or less just a framework for each of us. It's this like framework of different roles and openings and opportunities for each of us as professionals to learn and grow and develop.
Mhm.
And my goal here at Avail is really, how do I help people, conquer and master whatever role they're in today, and then feed them new challenges? Because as soon as people get bored, get complacent, that's when they'll eventually start looking for new challenges outside of Avail. So if I can keep throwing them new obstacles, new challenges, they're going to continue growing and developing professionally and personally. And that's just, for me as a leader, so much fun to see.
Yeah, that is more of like I guess, an advanced leadership question for you. Have you seen that throwing them those different challenges or opportunities might have reframed your idea or vision for where the company could go in a good or a bad way, if that makes sense? Like you have this vision where you want it to go, but you give people a lot of freedom to choose kind of their things they're passionate about, or they're really excited, or they think this would be really valuable. And it just totally changed where you thought you could take the company. Has that happened in a good or a bad way?
Yeah, it certainly has. I mean, I think about one of the guys who joined our marketing team, or actually, no, sorry, I take that back. He actually joined our team, joined our customer support team. So this is a guy who's got a master's degree from Northwestern University, and he joined our team because
Wildcats.
he was drawn to the culture, passionate about building in this real estate market. So he joined our team, and then pretty quickly he said, look, there's this like built-in community of landlords and renters, and there's something here within like this whole notion of community. And we just thought we were building software. Like we thought we were building tools to help landlords better manage properties. But what Robert actually showed us was, if we can unlock this whole idea of community, and if we can start building community around our product, that's going to help us in so many different ways. And so what we did then is we started this online forum where landlords can interact with each other. Robert, now his official title is community manager. He spends basically his entire 40, 50, 60 hours a week kind of engaging with the Avail community. When we started the company, I never imagined that we would have this, online forum for landlords, that we would ever employ someone with the title of community manager, but that was important for him. And we were fortunate to get out of our own way and let him kind of drive the company in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's a great, another kind of interesting, dichotomy too, that shows up with leaders. Sometimes you have these kind of like the Steve Jobs vision of where he was just like, had this vision in his head of exactly what all these products he was going to do look like. And then he, like, people that had different ideas, he was like, no, it's got to be like this. And it's like, that's one vision of a leader. But then you have this other vision of people that kind of let everyone freely kind of run and come up with ideas. But sometimes they can take ideas that are way out of the realm of feasibility, or they waste resources on something that's not going to be good or whatever. And there's kind of this nice middle ground that you seem to have discovered, which is like, it's consistent within our vision. Our vision is broad enough to capture creativity with our employees and our people, but it's tight enough to make sure that we're still moving in the right direction, because leadership by definition is to move in a common direction, right? I wanted to lead a group of people out somewhere, I would take them in a direction of some kind. And the closer they are together, the faster you can kind of get there. What do you think is the best way of kind of finding that middle ground, just like what does it look like from like your mission vision standpoint and communicating that to your employees and but still being able to have like, hey, community forum, that's kind of a cool idea that could totally take us where we're going anyway, like what is that middle ground to you?
Yeah, I think for us, we've I mean, swayed back and forth along that like spectrum of, really tight execution against our kind of mission and short-term goals and thinking, but also allowing for that creativity. And a lot of it comes down to just open communication. And I think open communication with the team is like paramount whenever you're trying to do that, because you're right, there are those certain times where, hey, we've got 5 weeks left in the quarter, we need to accomplish X, Y, and Z. We don't have the luxury to go and dedicate 2 weeks to kind of creative endeavors. Now, there's other times when we definitely do, and I think finding that balance is all more or less a matter of circumstance and kind of what's going on, what does the company need at a particular time. And then we just come back to kind of our core values and mission around building this end-to-end community for landlords and responsible tenants.
Yeah, I think it's about having that vision that's but still distant enough to where you can make sure like, yep, we're getting to the mountain. We see the mountain over there. If we take a couple steps this way, we're still getting to the mountain. It's just like keeping that breadth there. If that analogy makes sense, I don't know. It's hard on a podcast because there's like no people to like, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about. When I make those analogies and I'm speaking, it's just like people will start looking other places. I'm like, okay, that one didn't stick, but we'll try another one. But yeah, you get the idea. I think it's and I think that's a great way of like kind of simplifying it too. It can be theoretical, and you could view this as a paradox, but in a way, it's like having those open streams of conversation to make sure you're finding that middle ground through dialogue with people, and that you're clear about the goals and where you're trying to go. And I think the more like straightforward you can be about what you're trying to accomplish, people come up with so many cool, creative ways how to get there. Like your community forum idea.
And that's, I mean, we're fortunate to now have a team of people, but I mean, there's so many good ideas that come up. I'm often overwhelmed, and unfortunately, it's just like, hey, there's only 24 hours in the day. There's only 30 of us. Like,
you can't solve the whole world today.
We can't do everything today.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, so for aspiring entrepreneurs or people that might be interested in they're thinking about it or they've just started, what would your just kind of like life advice be to those people out there that are thinking about getting into something or thinking about following their passion? What does that look like from the Ryan Coon example?
Yeah. So I think for me, I've a couple of thoughts on that. I think it's number one, you've got to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, why you're excited about it, why you're passionate. Like, you've really got to like look inside and make sure that whatever you're doing is aligned with where you want to be. It's something that like you're deeply excited about, and not just for the reasons of like, hey, I want to build an app and sell it and make a bunch of money. But it's all about like really making sure that it's something you're personally dedicated to and interested in. Number two, and I think for me personally, that thing that I'm most passionate about is learning. And whether it's building software that helps improve the rental experience for landlords and tenants, more than even that, it's just, hey, I love every day because I get to learn new things. And for me, that's my passion. I think the other thing that I would encourage entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs to do is, do it. Like the things that I found in my life that I regret the most are chances that I didn't take. You don't often regret trying something new, testing something, going like taking a chance. It's often more that like, hey, I wish I would have done X, Y, or Z. So I would encourage people just like get outside the comfort zone, go do it, test it, try it. And then lastly, don't be like, if it doesn't work out, don't be ashamed. Like, view it as a learning opportunity. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying something new and falling off the bike and getting back on it. That's part of the journey of life.
Yeah, great advice, because so many times we just get we are so risk averse in a way that it's just you're afraid to kind of take those opportunities when they show up, and just like, screw it, let's give this a shot. And there is that space where I talk, a lot of clients that reach out to me, they're kind of overly opportunistic to where they take on so many opportunities, they're not focused enough. And it just comes back to this pendulum that I like to visualize every time someone arrives in a situation. It's like, okay, but I think you bring up a great point. That's like, if there's something out there, and there's an opportunity, and you have the time, the energy, the resources, you're lacking, a cause or a purpose, like just dig into something, like kind of get in there, like go try stuff, and then come back to that mission statement, do that inner work, that kind of like personal growth and development. So on that kind of subject, very quickly before we wrap up today, is like, what are some success habits you just swear by? Like, what's something you do to kind of make sure you're climbing the ladder of success every day?
Well, I think for me, a couple of, like, I'd say three things come to mind. Number one, you can't, in my opinion, you can't really do anything. You can't dedicate yourself to a particular thing if you don't take care of yourself first. So for me, that comes down to like eating well, getting enough sleep, trying to like just take care of like basic necessities. Like you gotta eat well, be healthy, work out, carve out time for yourself, is number one. Number two, I think I think especially now with COVID, there becomes this tricky balance between kind of work and profession, like work life, personal life and stuff, that whole work-life balance. But I think for a lot of people, and for me in particular, what I found is, rather than this like work-life balance where it's one or the other, it's like work-life harmony. So I really try and find that harmony. So number one, health. Number two, that like work-life harmony. And then number three, it's really just like constantly checking in, making sure that what you're doing aligns with kind of that mission. So what we were just talking about with AJ, where it's like, check in and make sure that, the course that you charted is actually going towards that mountain out there. Make sure, check in weekly, check in monthly, or however often makes sense for you, but like, make sure that you're getting towards where you want to be. Or maybe it's, hey, let's reevaluate where I want to be. Which mountain are we going for? Which of those like mountains are we trying to climb? So,
yeah, great advice. On the subject of health, you mentioned sleep, and I think that was, I never have talked about this much, but that's like a principle I just swear by. It's like when I was at West Point, someone told me, they're like, look, make sure you get a minimum 8 hours of sleep every night. And then, because no matter what, there's like so many things to do that you'll just be able to, you'll just never sleep, because there's always so many things. So he's like, just cut your losses, go to sleep. You'll be way sharper the next day to be able to like try to cram something before a test and stay up way late and do that. And I've just taken that to heart, number one, because I love sleep. And number two, because your just cognitive function is so much better if you can get 8 or more hours of sleep every night. And you see these dudes out there in like entrepreneur world, just like hustle, grind, sleep, never, eat, whatever. It's like, dude, no, sleep 8 hours is the like most hidden gem to success of anything. Body recovery, like your just wits. It saves you from dementia later in your life. I mean, there's so endless amount of beautiful things that come with sleep. What's like just one quick, like on the health subject, like what's one thing you do to stay healthy? Like what's your diet look like, or like what kind of workouts you normally do?
Yeah, for me, especially now with COVID, I mean, the gym that I would normally go to, I used to do kind of a blend of cardio and strength and stuff. For me right now, I just find, running is like my go-to. Maybe 5-6 days a week, try and do minimum 5 miles. So, 25, 30 miles of running a week. And for me personally, it's one of those, it's the best way ever to like kind of plug in a podcast or an audiobook and just like dual kind of two birds, one stone. Like run, work out, get the health benefits of working out, but also have that like story, that audiobook in the ear that you're continuing to learn.
Yeah, that kind of that net value. Something I've noticed with running is you know how like normally when you're on like a long trip or you're driving or whatever and you just have like a bunch of ideas all the time. Well, running kind of lets you catch one and then like take it to the end. So you'll just like have one, like I don't know, if you have like whatever you're thinking about, it almost keeps that one idea the whole time, but it lets you just go deeper with that idea instead of just letting a bazillion ideas bounce around like normally throughout the day. I think that's kind of a cool like I've talked to my friends about it and they kind of experience the same thing. Do you experience that as well? Like if you're thinking about something and you want to like, let's flesh this idea out, you go for a 20-minute run or something and you can just like get to the end of that idea pretty quickly.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, just you just have that time to like unpack things from a bunch of different angles. It's a really powerful, kind of fun way to kill time.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Ryan, I wanna give our audience an opportunity to connect with you, or like we have a lot of real estate professionals that listen to this, and that want to check out Avail or some other stuff that you've got going on. Like, how can people get a hold of you or follow along with what's going on with your life?
Yeah, anyone in the audience who's curious what we're doing here at Avail, head on over to our website, avail.co. So avail.co, avail.co. For anyone who wants to reach out to me personally, my personal email address is Ryan, RYAN, at avail.co. So we're also on all the social media at Hello Avail. So come on over, email me personally, drop us an email, hello@avail.co, find us on social media, or check out the site, avail.co.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on the show. Ryan Coon, everybody, giving us some awesome startup tips.
Thanks so much for having me, AJ. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, guys, this is Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. We bring you winners, entrepreneurs, and we also talk about deep thoughts philosophy on this podcast. You can go to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, anywhere you listen to the podcast, aaronjarmstrong.com/podcasts, or you can follow along with me and what I got going on at Aaron Armstrong 33 on Instagram. Thanks a lot, everybody. Be somebody.